I don't remember much about my escape from the Martians, except that I was very scared and kept running into trees and through bushes. Everywhere around me, I felt the danger of the Martians who were attacking Earth with their heat weapon. I managed to make it to a road, but I was so tired that I had to stop and rest. I fell down by the side of the road near a bridge, and I must have been there for a while. When I woke up, I felt confused and disoriented. I didn't understand how I had ended up there. I wasn't scared anymore, and I realized that my hat was gone and my collar was broken. Before, I had only been focused on how scared and weak I felt and that I was about to die. But now, everything seemed like a dream, and I couldn't believe that what had happened was real. I was back to being myself again, a normal person, and it was like nothing had happened. I got up and walked up the steep bridge, feeling unsteady and weak. I was amazed by everything around me, but my mind was empty, and I felt like my muscles and nerves had no energy left. I may have stumbled like a drunk person. A man who was working and carrying a basket, with a little boy running beside him, passed me and said goodnight. I wanted to talk to him, but I didn't. Instead, I muttered something meaningless in response and continued walking over the bridge. As I walked, I saw a train passing by, with lots of bright lights and smoke coming from it. It made a lot of noise as it went south. I also saw some people talking near a gate of a row of houses called Oriental Terrace. Everything looked so normal and familiar, except for what had just happened behind me. It was crazy and impossible. I told myself that it couldn't be real. Maybe I am a person who has unusual feelings. I don't know if other people feel the same way as I do. Sometimes, I feel like I'm not really part of myself or the world around me. It's like I'm watching everything from a faraway place that's outside of time and space, and beyond all the stress and sadness. I felt that way very strongly that night, and it made me realize that there was another side to my dream. The problem was that it seemed strange to see everything peaceful and quiet, while just 2 miles away, there was sudden death happening. There was noise from the nearby gasworks, and all the electric lamps were turned on. I went up to a group of people and asked them what was happening at the common. One of the men turned to me and asked if I had just been there. The woman at the gate said that people were acting strange about the common and asked me what was going on. I told them about the creatures from Mars and asked if they had heard of them. The woman laughed and said she had heard enough. I felt embarrassed and angry because I couldn't explain to them what I had seen. They laughed again because they couldn't understand my words properly. I told them they will know more soon, and I left to go back home. When I arrived, my wife was shocked by my appearance. I went to the dining room, sat down, drank some wine, and then I explained to her what I had seen. We didn't eat our dinner, which was already served on the table. To make her feel better, I told her that those creatures were very slow and couldn't get out of the pit, but they could kill anyone who came near them. However, they were really horrifying. "Don't worry," said my wife, frowning and touching my hand. "I feel sorry for Ogilvy," I said. "He might be dead over there." My wife didn't find it hard to believe my experience. When I saw how scared she looked, I stopped talking. She kept saying, "They might come here," over and over again. I tried to make her feel better by offering her wine and telling her that the creatures were very slow and couldn't move very well. I tried to make my wife and myself feel better by remembering what Ogilvy had told me. He said that it was impossible for the Martians to stay on Earth. I emphasized the difficulty of gravity. On Earth, gravity is 3 times stronger than on Mars. So a Martian would weigh 3 times more on Earth, even though their muscle strength would be the same. Their own body would feel very heavy to them, like carrying a block of lead. This was what most people thought. The newspapers, like the Times and the Daily Telegraph, also agreed with this idea the next day. However, we all missed 2 things that could change the situation. First, the air on Earth has more oxygen than the air on Mars. This extra oxygen could give the Martians more energy to cope with the heavier gravity. Second, the Martians were very smart and could find ways to move without using much muscle. At the time, I didn't think about these things. I thought the Martians had no chance of surviving on Earth. But as I ate and drank, I began to feel more confident and brave. I needed to reassure my wife that everything would be all right. "I think the Martians made a mistake," I said, playing with my wine glass. "They're dangerous because they're probably very scared and confused. Maybe they thought they wouldn't find any living things on Earth, especially not intelligent ones like us. If things get really bad," I said, "we can use a bomb to kill all of them in the pit." I was so excited by the events that my ability to understand things was affected. I still remember the dinner table very clearly. My wife looked worried and was sitting under a pink lampshade. The table was covered in a white cloth and had shiny silver and glass things on it. I had a glass of red wine which I can still remember very well. After dinner, I sat smoking a cigarette and eating nuts. I was sad about what happened and angry at the Martians for being so afraid. It's like a bird in Mauritius who was happy and safe in their nest, until some sailors came and wanted to eat the animals there. The bird might have said, "We'll attack them tomorrow." I didn't know it at the time, but that was the last fancy dinner I would have for a long time, because some strange and terrible things were about to happen. On Friday, something very unusual happened. The narrator thinks the most remarkable thing about it was how normal life continued alongside the strange events. If you drew a circle around the area where the strange events were happening, hardly anyone outside of it would have noticed. Some people had heard about what was happening, but it wasn't as big a deal as if there had been an important announcement. In London, a newspaper thought a report about what was happening was false and didn't print anything about it. Even within the area where strange things were happening, most people were just going about their daily lives. People were having dinner, working in their gardens, putting their children to bed, going for walks, and studying. In the village, people were mostly going about their daily routines as usual, as if nothing strange was happening. Some people might have heard about the unusual events and talked about them in pubs or heard about them from someone who saw what was happening, causing some excitement. But at train stations like Woking, Horsell and Chobham, things seemed normal. Trains were still running and people were coming and going. A boy was even selling newspapers with the latest news. Even when excited people arrived at the station with incredible news, it didn't cause much of a disturbance. People on trains heading to London saw a small fire in the distance, but didn't think much of it. Only around the edge of the common could people see that something unusual was happening, with a few houses burning and people staying up all night. On Friday night, a curious crowd gathered on the Chobham and Horsell bridges, with people coming and going but the crowd staying. Some brave people went into the darkness and got close to the Martians, but they never came back because the Martians had a weapon called the heat ray. The common area around the cylinder was silent and desolate, with burnt bodies lying around all night and the next day. Some people could hear hammering from the pit. The cylinder was like a poisoned dart sticking into the earth, but it had not yet affected the rest of the world. The Martians worked tirelessly all night on their machines, and occasionally greenish-white smoke rose up to the sky. Around 11 o'clock, a group of soldiers arrived in Horsell and positioned themselves along the common to create a barrier. Later, another group of soldiers arrived in Chobham to position themselves on the northern side of the common. Some officers from the Inkerman barracks had been on the common earlier in the day, but one of them, Major Eden, was missing. The colonel of the regiment went to the Chobham bridge and was questioning the crowd at midnight. The military authorities were aware of the seriousness of the situation. The next morning, at around 11 o'clock, a squadron of Hussars, 2 Maxims, and about 400 men from the Cardigan Regiment left Aldershot. Just a few seconds after midnight, the crowd in the Chertsey Road in Woking saw a star falling from the sky into the pine woods to the northwest. It was greenish in color and produced a bright, silent flash like summer lightning. This was the second cylinder.